Hi, in this video, we're going to be talking about François Robichon de la Guérinière. La Guérinière is regarded as the god, the father of classical dressage as we know it today for very, very good reasons. He made things very, very clear. His system of using the shoulder in to the renvers as the key, this is what we're going to dive into. Hi, it's Rupert Isaacson from longridehome.com and our Helios Harmony dressage and horse training program. I'm going to talk to you today about La Guérinière. To be completely accurate, François Robichon de la Guérinière. You're going to hear his name a lot if you're involved in classical horse training. Why? Who was he? Why does everyone treat him as if he sat on the right hand of God or basically was God? It's like he was the Zeus in the pantheon of the old masters. And that's actually kind of true. And the reason is because when he started writing in the early 18th century, he had a problem he was trying to address. And his problem was this. All of the masters before him for about 200 years or so, Grisoni, Fieschi, Pluvinel, de la Brue, the Duke of Newcastle, William Cavendish, and we'll go into all these people. They all wrote books that were basically unreadable because they were, aristocrats who didn't like to edit what they wrote. They were horsemen. They were not trained communicators. And La Guerinière, who was running the royal stables for the King of France in the early 18th century, he had a job that was really quite difficult. He had to produce incredible horses in every discipline, not just dressage. I want to really emphasize this. Most of the old masters were universal horsemen. They were not just dressage people. So when we decide to just specialize in dressage, we're not actually following what the old masters did at all. So I want to go back to this in a minute. It's much more important that we are interdisciplinary, cross-fertilization of our disciplines. All right. But he had a problem, which was that he had to train not just the royal riders and the people in the royal school and the horse trainers there, but he basically had to train the cavalry. And he basically had to create, junior people that could go out and make sure that the standard of horsemanship in France was always at the absolute apogee that it could be in the world. And at that time, that was indeed the case. So he needed to come up with a training system that everyone could understand, where you didn't have to try and decipher what all these old guys were saying and look at all the times where they contradicted themselves and think, okay, well, are they contradicting themselves because of the context is different here or something? So he writes in his introduction, and this is his book. And as you can see, his dressage book, it's a slim volume. So all of the wisdom that's in here is so dense. It's like a superfood, plant density, like an avocado or something. There's just so much in it. You can work from this like 20 times and never get to the bottom of it. He said, I'm going to reinterpret all this old stuff, cut out all of the guff, cut to the chase, and give you, the reader, what you need. And he did. You still need to understand, if you're going to read this book, The School of Horsemanship, or École de la Cavalerie, as it was called, you still need a certain amount of dressage knowledge to be able to decipher everything. But if you do have that basic, like if you've gone through our basic Helios course, you'll absolutely be able to train your horses from here. And if you come and work with us, for example, at our stable, and we're going through an exercise with our horses with you, I can probably tell you which page of this book we're going from. I don't invent anything. I just follow what the old masters did because I'm not clever enough to come up with new stuff myself, Sam. And I'm not a good enough horseman or a gifted enough rider. I follow the mentors. Anyway, so what he did is he basically boiled it down to the way you dress the horse. Dressing means to put together. Does not mean to train. It means to put the hind legs under the point of gravity. You can put yourself together, by the way. You can dress yourself in clothes. You can put a dressing on your wound. You can put a dressing on your salad. A lady, when she sat at her dressing table, did not put her clothes on because her butt's on the chair. It's a bit difficult to put your clothes on. She was putting her hair and her face together. It's an old word for to put together in the Germanic languages, and Northern French is part of the Germanic languages, Norman French. So he boiled it down to, you've got to put one hind leg under and then the other hind leg under, and then you change direction, you put the other hind leg under and you put the other hind leg under, and you keep doing that until you can turn the first pattern into a shoulders in. And he's often credited with being the inventor of the shoulders in. He wasn't, and he never made a claim to be. But what he did do is he interpreted the shoulders in and really isolated it as this kind of really super important thing that everybody's got to understand, because it puts this first hind leg under the point of gravity. If the horse can't do that, the horse can't understand either. So the shoulder in and the preparations for the shoulders in, which are types of leg yield, become really important. Then you put the outside hind leg under, and you do that by changing the bend of the horse in the shoulders in, and that same leg that was the inside hind leg, because where he was turned away from the movement going up the wall, suddenly becomes the outside hind leg, and that movement is the renvers. So shoulders in to renvers is the key for his training system. And when you can really get your head around that, it's really simple. It's just like pattern 1, pattern 2. You've heard me, if you've ever trained with me, or if you've done any of our courses, we're talking about pattern 1, pattern 2 all the time. Yes, it is that simple. It really, truly is. The difficulty thing, though, is doing it, because you've got monkeys and you've got ponies. And monkeys have monkey brains and monkey bodies, and ponies have pony brains and pony bodies. So bringing the monkey and the pony together in this is actually the difficult thing. But the concept itself is very, very simple. The hind legs come under the point of gravity, and then you can do stuff. The horse's energy is available to you in 3 dimensions. So he was recognized as a genius of his time because other people started to use his books. And if you look on the cover, you'll see it's part 2. That's a clue. Where's part 1? Where's part 3? They're often not in translation, because part 1 is all about how to train the carriage horse, and part 3 is all about veterinary stuff for horses. And even in this school of horsemanship, it's not all about dressage. He talks about how to make sure that your horse can trail ride, that your horse can jump small obstacles, that your horse can do all of that stuff that it needs to do before you ever start any dressage. And he calls that process the débourrage. And we're going to do videos on the débourrage, the preparation. It means kind of scraping off the rough edges in Old French. The débourrage that comes before the dressage, the putting together of the horse. So the bit that everyone's trying to work from is really just only a fraction of his work. And he himself is saying, if you don't understand that whole picture, if you don't have your basic horsemanship down, if your horse can't trail ride, if your horse is spooky, if your horse can't carry weight, if you haven't put the muscles on your horse through lunging and in-hand work and that sort of thing, then forget the dressage. He says all this. Okay. He then says that you start the dressage when the horse is about 6 or 7. This is really important. Now, obviously, in this day and age, with equine nutrition and that sort of thing, do we need to be as anal about that? I don't know. But perhaps what we should consider is that given that La Guérinière was mostly talking about training young stallions, and young stallions come with massive amounts of muscle on them, and we in our day and age are mostly dealing with geldings and mares, we need to ask ourselves, because they don't have as much muscle, does our horse have enough muscle to be a La Guérinière type horse, i.e. a dressage horse? And if not, how are we going to put that on? Lunging, long reining, in-hand work. And are we feeding the horse enough? Is the horse strong enough, fit enough? Are we going up the hills enough? That sort of thing. And if he was starting these young stallions in the dressage, not the débourrage, at 6 or 7 and saying that's when they're mentally and physically ready for this, we've got to be sure that we are following that same pattern as well. So, for example, when I was a kid, your average Grand Prix dressage horse's age was about 13. Now it's gone down to like 7 or 8. And the horses seem to break a lot now. Maybe we need to take a little bit out of the book from the old masters and go a little slower and make sure our horse is a little more mature before we begin that difficult work. All right, back to his actual training method. So the shoulders into the renvers is the key, but there are preparation patterns for this and all the straight lines and circles and so forth. He also doesn't just emphasize the circle. He says some horses actually have trouble with circles. And for this type of horse, he does a square instead. And he says if you do the square enough, then the horse will end up actually rounding off the circles and you'll end up with nice circles. And this is true also with what he would call the volts, which are the small circles. Some people say volts are 6 meters. Some people say volts are 10 meters. Some people say volts are even less. He refers to all three, that you have an ever decreasing circumference of these circles as the horse gets more and more balanced. But you can do them as squares or you can do them as circles depending on the horse. He also really emphasizes the counter-canter, which is effectively renvers in canter, and he calls it the counter change of hand. Really crazily confusing term. Took me ages to decipher that actually that's the counter-canter. And that you need to build the horse up in strength and straightness and symmetry through the counter-canter, and then you can start thinking about using a pattern 1 to a pattern 2 in the canter, from the counter-canter back to a true canter, first with a pause in between, a simple change, and then eventually a flying change. Now, he is also training the horse, as you know, as a carriage horse. He's training a horse for war, and he's training the general riding horse. Sometimes he even talks about gaited horses as well. So clearly the message is, if you want to be a really good dressage rider, you've got to be a good general all-round horseman, and you've got to know other disciplines as well. He himself is saying this. He also laments that people don't ride as well in his day as they did in his father's and his grandfather's day. He said back in the 17th century, people rode so much better. And he's got a really great quote, which is that he was quite a modest man. He was approached by one of the country's great noblemen to teach the nobleman's son. And the nobleman said to La Guérinière, "You don't have to train my son to be an écuyer or anything." Écuyer means like a real expert horse trainer. Just to, to put that he can make the horse put the feet where he wants them to. And La Guérinière turned to the guy and said, "Ah, yes, the very same thing I've been trying to do myself this past 60 years. So he had a sense of humor. He was about the joy. Okay, we've covered his shoulder into renvers. We've covered the fact that he emphasizes a débourrage before the dressage. We've covered that he uses a circle and a square, depending on the type of horse. We've covered the counter change of hand and the fact that he emphasized the counter-canter, renvers and canter, because canter work is super important, of course, if you're going into battle. And we've covered the fact that he also was writing his book about training the carriage horse, the war horse, the general riding horse, gaited horses, and veterinary stuff for horses. When you go to the Spanish Riding School of Vienna, or when you go to the Royal School in Lisbon or in Andalusia, Jerez, or if you go to the Valença family in Portugal, who are amazing, or if you come to us to train with us at Helios Harmony. So all those amazing schools and little old us, we're all doing this book, basically. Okay. Because La Guérinière was basically writing this for a Baroque type of horse. Of course, 100 years later, horses changed. Thoroughbreds became much more in use. The warm bloods were beginning to be used up in Germany, Anglo-Arabs in France. And so you ended up with horse trainers having to try to get these new types of horse to go like Baroque horses. And this actually meant that things had to be tweaked a bit. So in France, this man, Baucher, who we're going to be making videos about, came up with a system that brings you back to here if you're using an Anglo-Arab or a thoroughbred. And up in Germany, this man here, Gustav Steinbrecht, we're going to be doing some videos on him too. He tweaked the system so that when you use these new heavier warm bloods, these powerful sort of carriage horses that were being repurposed as riding horses, you could get them to come back here. So we're going to be doing videos on that. And then in the 20th century, you had this guy, Nuno Oliveira. Check out our video on Master Nuno Oliveira, who synthesized all three methods and said, for the modern horse and rider, you've actually got to kind of know mostly La Guérinière, but you've got to know Steinbrecht if you're riding these German type horses, and you've got to know Baucher if you're riding these lighter, hotter type of horses, especially the Anglo-Arabs and the thoroughbreds. And then you can synthesize all three approaches, which is really just one approach. It's still always trying to get back to La Guérinière, but Steinbrecht for the heavier warm bloods, bit of Baucher if you're going for the lighter thoroughbreds and Anglo-Arabs. And then you can train your modern horse effectively. So check out our video on Master Nuno Oliveira as well, probably be coming up. And if you've got any questions, please just put them in the comments below. We will absolutely answer them. If you will do webinars on them as well, if you're members on our site, heliosharmony.com. And if you want to come train with us again, just check us out on heliosharmony.com and come and ride our schoolmasters with us. If this was helpful at all, please give it a thumbs up, like and subscribe. It really, really helps get this knowledge out there. There's so many of us who spent so long in confusion about all this dressage business. Our job is to shed light and make it clear. So please like and subscribe and look out for the next videos coming up. See you next time.